Welcome to Testing Experts with Opinions, an inspired testing podcast aimed at creating conversations about trends, tools, and technology in the software testing space.
Prediction for 2024 is there's going to be a shift in terms of testing roles, and the qualifications are also going to be tested and tried. For example, the conventional manual testing role is going to be required to be coupled with a bit of automation. The manual testers or the traditional software test analysts may be required to write a little bit of code here and there to be able to execute already written scripts. Likewise, there's also going to be a demand for automation engineers who can step up into quality engineers in the sense that they've got a quality head, they're true quality gatekeepers, and they can write code and they can think, or in their thought process is shift left kind of focused. And again, there's likely to be a demand for more of SDETs, our software developers in tests. And these are automation engineers who have got a very strong development background, but have also good understanding of software testing. So career-wise, there's going to be a shift. Recently, there are quite a number of training certifications for AI in testing. And my prediction is testers who are going to remain on the same level with the same knowledge are going to become irrelevant and will be surely faced off. Other companies already in South Africa, they're now aiming for what they're calling full stack engineers, full stack quality engineers. They should be able to do functional testing on web and API. They should also be able to write tests in for mobile, both API and Android. They should also be able to do performance testing using any of the open source tools like JMeter and other commercial tools like Neoload. So the conventional qualifications and roles or responsibility of testers, I foresee them changing in 2024.
Matt, you've just said about four things there which could make a podcast on its own. I will have to decide which of those I talk about, but I actually I was part of a conversation this morning, and it was around manual testers and manual testers that only have manual testing skills. And obviously the natural thing always is, we need to turn them into automation engineers, or they need to learn automation. But I guess there are other things that you can do as well as a manual tester these days. And we can touch on the low code automation tools in a second, which is still automation. But in terms of things like test data engineers, so we know at Inspired Testing there's test data management and there's test environments management, there's data testing, etc. You can probably transition quite a bit easier from being a manual tester to maybe a test data engineer as opposed to automation. Or potentially, and this is more on the automation side, maybe learning something like Robot Framework or Tricentis, maybe Tosca, those tools which don't need the deep-rooted automation coding knowledge. Then again, not every manual tester wants to do automation. Not every manual tester wants to go down the automation route. But if we're saying that the market and the trend seems to be that quality engineering role where you need to be able to do, I guess, all aspects to some level, what advice would you give to a manual tester today, which don't they either don't or they haven't had the opportunity to go down the automation route? What other, I guess, avenues are there for them to upskill or reskill themselves? Now, it's not just a question for you, Matt, it's for everyone. Stefan?
So are you, just to understand your question, are you saying if automation isn't necessarily something that they've had opportunity or would be uncomfortable with are there other avenues in testing that they could maybe look at?
Yeah, so let's I mean, the obvious ones are, okay, you're a manual tester today, that's the thing you've always done. Okay, become a test manager or become a test lead. Now that's another contentious issue for me, because if all companies are going towards agile, what's a test manager's role within agile? But that we can discuss another day. But if you a manual tester and you don't necessarily want to go down the automation route, I guess what other avenues are there for you?
So it's interesting you asked that. I was reading few articles this morning and listening to something from Joe Colantonio as well, and he touched on observability testing. Sorry, that's a tongue twister for me all of a sudden. Observability testing. So, I mean, that just opened up my thoughts in terms of thinking about non-functional testing types, that I think there's a whole untapped level of testing that not a lot of people are dabbling with. I mean, if you talk about observability testing, I mean, it's something I personally haven't played around with a lot in my career. And I don't know if you, just in terms of the concept, it's focusing on how well a system can be monitored and understood and debugged in real time, particularly in production environments. So if that system goes to production and something goes wrong, how easily can the DevOps or the prod support guys look at the events, the metrics, the logs, and alerts? And that's something you can start to implement quite left in this, and push that as a non-functional requirement and test that and take that all the way through. I think there's lots of areas that people can focus on that's not necessarily coding specific, but maybe that's just one of the areas of non-functional testing. But I think that's something to look at, is across the shifting testing left and far right. I think there's a lot of non-functional areas somebody can become an expert in without having to even touch a piece of code.
So I want to think about what you just said, Leon, around people who don't want to. Can they? Absolutely, right? So you can always change your career focus if you want to, right? And no one can stop you from doing that. But I think if you want to stay in software quality assurance, then unfortunately you will have to touch on these things. Now, I know that we are scared, and a lot of testers out there are scared to embark on these journeys, but it's not as scary as you might think, right? So I see it, this quality engineering role, as being able to help yourself when you need to help yourself, right? So I'm not necessarily saying be an automation expert, be a performance expert, be a security expert, right? I'm saying that have the attitude that will get you to a GP place. So if you go to a GP, the GP can diagnose something and he or she will help you, but they're not an expert, a specialist. They will send you to a specialist when they need to send you to a specialist. But they still understand everything in the medical field well enough to at least start helping you. And I think from a testing perspective, if you are a manual tester today and you say, well, I absolutely categorically don't want to get involved in anything else, then maybe your only option is to look at being a test data manager or moving into something else. But if you want to stay in the and when I say being a test or software quality engineer, that is someone that can work in an agile testing team, also waterfall, but an agile testing team, right? And if you want to contribute in that agile testing team, these are the skills, especially around automation and some of the non-functional testing types, that you will have to learn. And again, I've had many conversations with potential clients that says, well, my people can't go to automation. I say, well, just start contributing to the automation effort. Don't become an expert developer overnight, but understand, if we're using BDD, how a feature file fits into the framework, and start writing those things. So there are pragmatic ways where you as a manual tester can get involved in the automation effort, for example, right? The same with performance testing. If you analyze a user story and you see, well, I think there's a performance impact there, write it down and get the experts in to come validate what you thought and learn from them. And next time you'll know a little bit more. So it's not being from a GP to being an expert in everything tomorrow, but it's having that attitude to listen out for certain things when I'm analyzing stories and requirements, to see, oh, maybe this accessibility thing, or wow, this sounds to me like there's a security risk, or this sounds to me like there's a performance impact, and then getting people. So you're still entrenching into that quality engineering mindset, although you're not an expert in everything. But I think that's a must from my perspective.
Yeah, and just to concur with what you said, so basically it's all in the mind, and it also starts with you as an individual to understand what is it that you want to do to stay relevant. For example, there's so many free sites like Test Automation University where you can learn coding from scratch. There are steps which are set there step by step to say, if you want to be an automation engineer who focuses on Java or C#, this is the route that you have to take. This is the path that you have to take. So there is a whole lot of open source sites that you can use. And again, Udemy is there. for a 200 Rand, you can buy a course that can teach you how to learn a new programming language. There's some exercises there. And once one has done that, it's also important to get hands-on exposure. For example, for those in companies where they're already implementing, shouldering is the best way to learn. You go and get paired with somebody who's already doing something in the project, not something theoretical, but you get your hands dirty into the project, start observing, watch while they're debugging, take notes, and you learn from there. So anybody who is a manual tester today, if your attitude is right, and you can literally do anything. It's only last week where we're looking at certain profiles where we discovered that some of the best IT guys really did not study computer science. They studied something completely different. So it's all in the mind and the attitude. For anybody who is coming from a manual testing background, if you tell yourself that you can do it, you can definitely do it. We also at some point carried an experiment with one business analyst. We wanted to see how that person was going to learn robot framework automation. We just said, okay, these are the keywords that you use. If you want to do this, you just type these commands. Can you do it? The business analyst, within a matter of 4 days, was able to just go through the robot framework training and was able to write some robot framework scripts. So it's all in the mind. Start by just telling yourself that you can do it, and then you can follow all the steps to get your hands dirty with the code.
Okay. So say all the manual testers all over the world listen to us and they transition to the roles you have recommended. Who is going to do manual testing unless we are saying manual testing is going to be eradicated?
I think the manual testing aspect becomes part of the quality engineer. So we're not saying manual testing has no place in testing. That's actually the complete opposite. The fact is just, if you look at companies today or employers, they're looking for someone that can do both. Well, not both, because both suggests only two. There's actually more than that. They want people that can do manual testing and automation and potentially some basic level of maybe performance testing, security testing, accessibility testing, etc. So I think it's just, and Matt just alluded to mindset. I think it's a mindset shift within maybe the whole testing community, where you need to realize that even if you're an automation engineer and that's your passion, some days you're going to have to do manual testing. Maybe it's every day, but there's no, oh, I'm only an automation engineer, therefore that's the only thing I'm going to do, or I'm just doing manual testing. So I think the manual testing aspect doesn't lose any of its value at all. It's just, why do I need to pay for two people doing two separate, I guess, roles, where actually I can combine those into one? And it's a similar thing that we're seeing with the whole move towards estates, and developers and testers are getting closer and closer together. If we think about it, developers are now expected to do more testing, and testers are expected to do more development in that scenario of estates. And in a similar way, I think it's similar in manual and automation and performance testing. Within the testing competency, those things are expected to all be done by a single person as opposed to three different people. I don't know whether anyone else wants to add on to that.
Oh, I totally agree. I don't think it takes away any of the testing disciplines or phases, right? It just, you need to, as a tester, enhance the one that's needed for the job today, right? And I agree with you, Mamatla. Manual testing and the art of testing and test analysis and design, that's even more important than ever, right? We're not taking away from that. It's just saying that do that more effectively, and then look out for other things as well, for non-functional requirements, for, oh yes, I've written the test case, I've executed it, let me automate it and add it to a pipeline. So absolutely, I think that skill will always stay the most important part for any testing, right? There's a saying out there that all testing is manual, right? So if you're not actually trying to interrogate the system and finding issues, then you are not really testing. And that will always be a manual effort, and that will always be any tester's main skill.
I mean, it's not replacing a tool in our tool belt. It's just adding more tools and then selecting the one best fit for the job.
But I think there's, again, I'm just going to go back to Matt's point about mindset. So I think a lot of manual testers, and we're getting slightly stuck on this, but a lot of manual testers feel that there's a massive mountain that they have to climb to get towards maybe being able to do automation. But if you know a basic level of code, it doesn't take you very much to get to that level. And then if you're working with an established automation framework, we're not expecting you to build an automation framework from day one. If you're working in a fairly established automation framework, it's not difficult writing automation tests, especially if you're just having to add additional tests, etc. So I would say that needs to be sort of the almost the first goal. Just get yourself to understand whatever. Maybe Python. Maybe Python is the best example and the best choice because it's one of the easier languages to learn. But understand the basics of Python, which isn't difficult to grasp. It's not going to take you long. And then work within an established framework where initially you're just adding tests. And if you're working in a company where there is an automation team and you're the manual tester, actually start pairing with them, sit next to them and just watch what they're doing. And gradually you start taking on more and more. But that starting point is always, in my mind, the starting point is always having that basic understanding of a language, a programming language, because otherwise it's just going to be Greek to you. It's like trying to read French when you're English or Afrikaans. But also, just to add to that, we all find ourselves in the technology world. And the one constant with technology is it's fast moving and it's always changing. Now, I think one of the things that you have to accept when you're in this space is you're going to constantly have to keep up to speed with what's happening. And you're always going to have to keep learning. This is not the type of job where you can stop learning at any point, because we've used the word irrelevant and it's maybe a very strong word, but to some degree, that is what will happen. Your skills will become irrelevant if you don't keep up to speed in terms of changes. So I think with AI, to me, it just feels like everything is moving much quicker than before. So maybe we're giving away our age here, but maybe 20, 25 years ago, you could be a manual tester and maybe you could sustain that I guess career for 20 or 30 years. It doesn't feel to me today, but without learning any additional skills. So you start doing manual testing at the start of your career, 20 years later, you're still doing manual testing. You've not really invested in yourself to upskill yourself. It doesn't feel to me like a 20-year-old today is going to be able to learn one skill and then for the next 20 years not do anything and still be relevant in 20 years' time, because things are just moving too quickly. And also, just my last point, because I'm talking too much, testing has also evolved massively over the last 10 or 15 years. So in the past, testing was almost a bit of a side hustle for many, where there wasn't so many companies specializing in testing. There wasn't so many opinions and I guess innovators around testing and changes to tools and tool vendors, et cetera, et cetera. So that's also contributed to this market moving quicker than it did 20 years ago or 15 or 10 years ago, because there's so many more people invested in changing it and making it more efficient, et cetera. Any opinions on that?
Yeah, I think
Yes. Yep.
Go, Matt. I'll go after you.
Yeah, Leon. So I actually agree with you, particularly when you said some time back, others would take testing as a side hustle. Go to any company, any other profession, or any other person can tell you that I also can test. Talk to a product owner, they will tell you that I also can test. A business analyst, they will tell you I also can test. Even developers, they will tell you that I also can test. So back then, testing was just something that can be done when other important things when other important things are done. But with the way things are moving, we're shifting left, we're shifting right. We cannot afford to remain with the same knowledge, testing with the same knowledge, or using the same test cases to test the same thing. So basically, we have to keep up learning, upskilling ourselves, because that's the only way we can be good testers, picking the relevant bugs. But otherwise, if we remain with the same knowledge, same test cases, we don't change anything, we'll have test cases which are always passing, but defects will always be picked in production.
Okay, I think that's a good point to a good time to move to the next point. Jan, what's your prediction?
It's actually good that we had this conversation, Matt, because it feeds into what I want to say and what I want to talk about, right? So why now is quality engineering a thing? Why are we expecting people to do more, right? Why are we shifting left, and have we shifted left for the last 10 years? Right? Why are we moving down pyramids to do things earlier, right? And why is AI important, as we just established, in the testers to make ourselves more efficient and more effective, right? So there must be a reason for all of these things. And one of the things that I'm seeing is this whole continuous testing principle, right? So we are doing all of these things to enable us to provide information and testing related information quicker, faster, so that deployment cycles can get shorter, right? And we've all heard about CI and CD, and those things are great. And we even went as far as integrating automation frameworks in that, but it goes beyond that. It's the movement of getting rid of testing as a phase and introducing testing as a process, right? So no longer do we want testing to be a phase somewhere in the SDLC. We're doing all of these things that we just spoke about to make testing part of the process. So this whole continuous testing cycle, especially in 2024, because for all the things we said, is now there. We've been hearing about it for a long time, but we are now there where testing needs to be continuous. We want to make changes, we want to deploy continuously, right? And that's why automation is there, and that's why all of these things are there. Now, because we are doing all of this, and Mamata, to your point, and I'm actually saying two things and not one, but so continuous testing, absolutely, I think is a big trend. And part of that is this whole concept of exploratory testing. Now, because we are spending so much time automating things and continuously testing things, it's extremely important that we hone our exploratory testing skills as testers, right? Because you don't have the luxury of writing extensive test cases anymore. You don't have the time to do all of these things. You need to have that testing mindset and start exploring the application beyond the boundaries of just a test case. Now, we all know exploratory testing is still a planned testing activity, right? I'm not saying just go Wild West on the application, but plan your sessions and start exploring the system more to get a lot of these defects out of the way very quickly, right? Start understanding what the system will do, what the system will do when we do unpredictable things to it as users would, right? So two things, continuous testing, I think is the one thing. And in the back of that is, what do we do and how do we find the defects still and test the system? Is by placing a big emphasis on exploratory testing and doing more in the exploratory testing world that we've ever done before.
Thank you, Jan. I really like the way you introduced the topic. Basically, you said, why are testers required to do more? So in my opinion, testers are required to do more because I think this is more like feeding onto the previous topic where we're saying we have to upskill and we have to remain relevant. We're expected to do more because a whole lot of these repetitive tasks should be done by tools, should be automated, and that's where technology kicks in. Basically, we need to take away any task that can be done repetitively. We can use a tool, we can schedule it. It can be run after hours. Instead of it being done by 10 people, one person can do it. The shift now is testers should mainly focus on the complexity of work, not the volume. Forget about the volumes. Let the tool do that repetitive task. The tester now, to your point, needs to focus more of exploratory testing and more of user experience testing. So these are some of the things which the tool cannot intuitively say, okay, this is very easy to use. Some of the things needs human opinions and the other external factors that may influence an opinion about usability of a tool or a system. So basically, this topic is kind of tied to what you're talking about earlier, where if we are not relevant, we may discover that we feel, oh, testers are doing a lot of work. They're doing too many tasks at the same time. And the feeling maybe will become jack of all trades, but master of none. But it all goes to let's upskill and let's be relevant.
A lot of what we often talk about is, all the examples we cite are often related to companies following agile or doing something within an agile type of model. But how does what you've said, Jan, so continuous testing, how do you see that actually working in a company not following agile? So we often laugh when we hear about people still talking about waterfall, but actually companies are still following waterfall, and often companies that say they're doing agile are actually doing more waterfall. So does that still hold true for, I guess, companies that aren't fully agile? So that whole continuous testing thing, and also companies that haven't actually adopted automation yet and gone down that route, how do you see continuous testing playing out in those scenarios?
Well, continuous testing will be very difficult if you don't embrace automation, right? So I think it doesn't matter the methodology you follow. If you are not embracing automation throughout your SDLC, you're never going to reach continuous testing, right? You're going to continuously test, but that's going to be a big effort for you, but you're not going to get to continuous testing. I think when you look at waterfall itself, the concept of continuous testing is not necessarily going to work because you don't have the same short cycles where you need to deploy, right? If I was a test manager in a waterfall project, I would still try and aim for that because you still want to get the testing out of the way and get to the definition of done, although that's not an official thing in waterfall, but get to the definition of done for the piece of testing as soon as possible, because then you need to move to the next piece that's on your list, right? So if you look at waterfall versus agile, it's not to say that we can't follow the same practices. The last part of it and the deployment part is not necessarily going to be there, but from a testing efficiency perspective, surely you'd still want to do things as effective and efficient as possible that enables you to do more of the testing in a shorter period of time. Like I said, we're giving away our age, but when we started testing, it was not unheard of for a test cycle to be 6 months. It was fairly a typical test cycle, right? But I would still say in today's world, there are tools and technologies out there to help you to do more in those 6 months and then mitigate more of the risk and focus on expanding your test coverage. The exploratory testing, and Matt, I'm glad you mentioned the UX testing as well, right? But those two aspects still hold true. It doesn't matter the methodology. You want to explore, you want to get testers to think more like a user would. Back in the day, again, we labeled testers as super users of a system. When you said that in the interview, people hired you on the spot, right? But that's really what we kind of forgot throughout the way, that the testers should also look at it from the user perspective, from a user experience, and then from exploratory testing perspective about how users on any level would actually operate the system.
Any other opinions or comments? Okay. I think we've got time for one more. Anyone want to discuss anything specific? Any specific ones that you want to highlight, or should we go to Mamatla again?
I just wanted to
or Stefan, sorry, Stefan was first.
Touch on something that Stefan said, so maybe we are going back to Stefan again. But you mentioned around IoT. I think we've heard about IoT the last couple of years. Some people embraced it. Some people said it's not really a thing to test. But I really think in 2024, IoT is here, right? Whether you like to know about it, whether you like to accept the fact or not that it is there. Is it completely different than API testing? I suppose in its core, it's pretty much that. But there are a lot of nuances around IoT, the environment that the IoT device lives in that we have to consider. So I think IoT is definitely something we can't forget about in 2024. And if you're going to do so as an organization, at least, we'll slowly become irrelevant in that space.
Agreed. I think you've just prompted a thought in my mind in terms of mobile testing as well. So we know that more and more people are using mobile devices for shopping and, well, everything. As much as you can do on your phone as possible, that's what you'll do. But it feels to me like often the first consideration is still desktop and browser on a computer instead of thinking about mobile. So what I'm trying to, I guess, say or suggest is, if you look at a project and it's an automation project, often the first thought is, how are we going to automate this on the browser, on a desktop site? mobile always feels to me like it's a secondary thought. It's not always front and center in terms of that automation strategy. But with I guess mobile becoming more and more prominent every year, do you guys and girls feel that anything is going to change around, I guess, mobile testing, mobile test strategies? We know there are cloud-based solutions out there, which many companies are going to now. Do you feel that they need to expand on their service offerings and start doing other things to maybe keep ahead of where mobile is going? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think mobile is getting more and more complex as the days goes on, as you said, Leon, and the amount of devices grows by the day as well. So definitely from a cloud provider perspective, I think there's a lot more they can do, and I've seen a lot of them starting to delve into how can we couple providing you the device with testing the device. Right, so I think that's really where you want to go from a software testing organization perspective. You don't really just want to use a mobile provider to provide the mobile phone, but you also want these providers to help you with the testing effort they're on. Now, a lot of the organizations out there providing these devices have started getting into the automation world, starting to help you to write test cases with an AI perspective on that device and the app you put on the device. So I'm seeing, because it's getting more and more complicated, these providers are now bringing more and more to the table to enable us to actually get the coverage that we need.
Yeah, fair point.
Yeah, in addition to what you said, Jan, and what I've also observed is, looking at the traditional way of testing mobile applications where you need a physical device. There are a number of providers who are now coming up with some cloud-based virtual environments and also some virtual images where you can literally spin up any container and run as many tests as you want without necessarily being limited by the number of physical devices you can connect at the same time. You can get any image in the cloud for whatever version or model of mobile device which you want to test. So these are some of the trends which we have observed that are also picking up lately. And also some low-code, no-code organizations are now offering quite a number of images for anyone to test on mobile devices.
And in terms of the skill set, do you feel that is there a change in skill set? Is there upskilling that needs to be done? So if you, I don't know, maybe you've worked in a company that's only had a website and there's been no mobile presence. I can't imagine that, but let's assume that you're only used to doing testing on a web browser on a desktop. Is there a different skill set that you require to do mobile automation? Is there a focus that needs to come into certain people's, I guess, upskilling?
In most cases, I've observed that the main automation which is being done is mainly based on the APM framework, and this can then be written in either C# or Java. But the cloud aspect is just maybe some external third-party vendors who provide some virtual devices. So skill-wise, I've not really seen so much of a huge shift besides the conventional C# and Java using APM, but the integration with the third-party tools where they provide the platform for you to be able to create your test cases faster for the mobile devices. I think that's the technical skill, okay, more of a tooling skill that is to be learned. But programming language-wise, it's mainly C# and Java. Python is coming in though, but C# and Java are still the main programming languages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Amatla?
Okay, so Leon, I wanted to understand where you are coming from with mobile testing, because most organizations are already adopting the mobile first strategy. And with the design for their web pages, they want them to be responsive. If you are on a desktop and then you transition to mobile, so the pages should scale according to the resolution. So I wanted to understand where you were coming from with the surge in mobile applications in 2024.
So I think for every example of a company that's going mobile first, there's probably another company that's not. And I'm not talking about the company so much as from a testing perspective. So if we know that there's a mobile site that needs to work on both, it's adaptive and it works on the browser as well as your mobile browser, are we giving enough, I guess, are we giving equal importance to making sure it works on the mobile as we are? Just historically, we've always tested on desktops, and it feels like that's always still the default thought. Are we giving enough consideration? And then if it's a native app on iOS or Android or wherever, are we critically thinking about what's required for that? And is that at the forefront of our minds, or is it still a bit of an afterthought? So if you know I need to test this on 15 different devices, what is your strategy, and are you giving importance to that? Are you gonna go a physical device route, or are you gonna go a device farm in the cloud somewhere? Also, if you don't have a framework, what sort of framework are you going to adopt? Are you doing automation on mobile? I mean, there's a client that we spoke to recently, and they're not doing any mobile automation. They're automating the heck out of their website, but mobile automation has never happened. And that just made me think that maybe that's not a common thing, but we kind of live in this, I guess, false sense of security where we feel, or we think everyone is giving equal importance to desktop or mobile or whatever, but maybe that's not always at the forefront of people's minds. Maybe the feeling is that, well, if it works on desktop and it's sharing the same code base, etc., we don't actually have to test on mobile. The risk is lower. I don't know. So it was just from that perspective. Okay, I think let's wrap it up there, because even my mom's not going to listen this long. Our one listener we've already lost. Stefan, did you want to say something, Stefan, as a closing thought?
No pressure having to put on the closing thought. No, I just wanted to mention on the mobile testing, I think there's lots we can do. I think even companies that are looking at mobile testing and realizing the importance, I think there are a lot we can say about standardizing the approach that we should look at when we talk about mobile testing. There's definitely a specific set of checklists or items that we should look at, like staggering the network, rendering, turning the phone around, battery consumption. There's things very specific and niche to that, and I think there's definitely places or things that we should consider specific to that area of testing. And I mean, we've seen that with clients recently as well, where we've helped them standardize their approach. So I think there's definitely a niche approach that and companies should make an effort to look at what are the special considerations that should take when looking at the mobile testing. Even silly things like per application, understanding what the demographics are of your various applications, and making sure that what kind of phones do certain areas, what phones are more popular in the user, or in the bulk of your user base, and making sure those ones are being tested first. There's a lot of things to consider. Yeah, so maybe that's just my final thought.
Okay, awesome. All right, thank you very much for your time. I think it was a good discussion. We touched on quite a few things, but I think a lot of the opinions, it's actually given me some ideas for maybe some focused discussions going forward, where some of these aspects we can delve deeper into and dive deeper into, and maybe have a dedicated podcast for it. But yeah, thanks a lot. Until next time.
This has been an episode of Testing Experts with Opinions, an inspired testing podcast. Find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok, where we're driving conversations.